Hi, everyone, and welcome. So, today I'm going to be sharing some intuitive guidance for the coming season. So, we're rolling into springtime here, and I feel like we're all on this journey of self discovery, right? And healing and spiritual growth. So, I thought it would be helpful to tune into the upcoming months, the season of spring, and see what comes through, just to sort of offer some guidance on your path. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Cassie Mendez, and I'm a shamanic healer and owner of the Spirit Within. And yeah, I'm glad you're joining me today. So, one thought that might cross people's minds is, how can this guidance be helpful if we're all on a different path, right? If we're all on our own unique journey. Well, I like to think of it like, what came to mind when I was sort of contemplating that a little bit was the beehive, right? So each bee in the hive has their own job, and they do their thing independently, right? But there's this collective energy of the hive. And so that's what I'm tuning into when I do this intuitive guidance reading. And because people in general we're also collective, right? We have our own unique path, but we also have this collective energy that is in the world, right? Because we're a part of it. So it can sort of help you navigate maybe more efficiently, right? If we're a little bit in tune with the collective energies, instead of sort of bumping around and, going left, right, it helps us to hone in and become more efficient with our healing path, right? If we have a little bit of direction. And another way to sort of look at it is, the flow of the river, right? It's easier to flow downstream with the current rather than swimming upstream. So this helps in that respect as well, so that we can kind of flow together, okay? And as usual, take what resonates and leave the rest. As you're hearing the different points that I go through, maybe just one or two really, pulls you in. Maybe you feel called to those two, or maybe you feel called to all of them. So just be open to it. And yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. So when I was first tuning into the energy, the very first thing that came up was, I don't know if you remember this, I grew up in the 80s, and Captain Planet was a cartoon back when I was younger that I used to love watching. And so if you've never heard of Captain Planet, you can go ahead and search it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But he was this superhero, and he had these like 5 people who were, I guess, his helpers or whatever, and they had these special rings, and each of them had an element that they worked with. So earth, fire, wind, water, and heart. And that was kind of that was sort of the direction that this wanted to take. And the slogan of Captain Planet at the end, of his theme song, Captain Planet, he's a hero, that one. And so at the very end, he goes, the power is yours. And that was exactly what was coming through for this. It's about cultivating our inner power and really being a champion on our own healing path, right? So the first element, so the headline for this one was Fast Moving, Fast Healing. And the element associated with this one is fire. The sense I got was that this really ties into the energy. This is the year of the fire horse. And to me, that is a very fast moving, creative, sort of free-spirited energy, right? And I think in the past, with healing and such, it was almost like this sort of gentle sort of glide through the pastures and graze about. And the energy of this year feels a lot more steeper, right? We have these sharp inclines and equally sharp drops. And so how that affects us energetically is, whereas maybe our healing before was sort of gradual, and we would have, maybe things come up every few months or something like that, it's almost like it's sort of condensed. And we might feel a little bit more unstable or more emotional or more triggered. But what it's really doing is, even though it feels more extreme in nature, and our response to it might feel more extreme, like we're, good one day and we're feeling great and, happy and excited and, hopeful for our healing or whatever we're going through one day. And then the next day we feel a little bit of despair, or we feel like, oh, I thought this was going in the upward direction, right? And that's that ups and downs. But that being said, it also means that we can sort of move through these. The invitation here is that we're moving through these at a quicker rate. So we don't necessarily need to have all that sort of integration time or grounding time in between maybe big shifts or big healing. The energy is supporting us to be able to move through things quicker. Okay, so even though it can feel a little bit shaky or a little bit touch and go, or make us feel unstable in a little way, just know that the energy is really supporting us at this time to work through these things. Okay, and then the other image I got of this that Spirit was showing me was the game of Tetris. And this goes with that fast moving energy. In Tetris, the blocks are coming down and we have to kind of line them up, and the game starts slowly, right? It starts slow, and then as we get a little bit more practice with it, then the blocks start to fall a little bit quicker because we've gotten the hang of it a little bit. So it sort of brings it up to the speed of where we're at. And so with that being said, even though it feels like, if it's feeling quicker for you, like you're having more stuff come up for healing, just know that you're at that level where it's supported. Like you're ready for that part of your healing, right? You can handle what is coming forward to you. So don't doubt yourself. So one helpful suggestion that came through with this was, we can temper this fire, right? This sort of like really fast moving fire energy with a little bit of earth. And how can we do that? So creating a routine. If you have a routine on your healing path, let's say you get up every morning and you meditate and you journal, or whatever it is for you. It can be anything, right? We all have different things that resonate, and that's totally fine. But the act of doing it routinely can be really helpful to help us feel more grounded in this really strong fire energy, and a little bit clearer headed to sort of navigate these sharp curves or these sharp inclines a little bit more smoothly. So I invite you to, if you don't have a routine as of yet, then I invite you to try one. And trial and error is fine until you figure out which one really feels right for you, but try to stick with it as best you can. Even if it's a small one, just a few minutes, So on to the next one. So for the next one, we have wind. And the headline for this one was Breaking the Chains That Bind You. And the image that I got of this was of a phoenix rising. I got this image of a phoenix, being chained at the legs and their wings chained down, and they break them off one by one, and then they take flight. They take flight into the air, and I got this image of this sort of free gliding into the sky. So for me, the energy around this was around freedom and self-empowerment, and the freedom to take flight on your own, right? Flying out of the nest, so how does a bird learn how to fly? It practices, it's flapping its wings in the nest until it's strong enough. And then one day it just jumps and it takes flight and it starts flying on its own, right? And I also got this message of gone is the guru. So what does that mean? That means that we're at a point where we're finding this within ourselves, right? We don't need somebody to tell us, you need to do this or you need to do that. We're really cultivating our inner power and our inner knowing, and we have the ability to do that. Right now, the energy is supporting us at this time to rise up into our own personal power, right? So what does that look like for us? Like, how can we begin to do that? So when I tapped into that, I got this sense that there's an invitation to take a look what's in your surroundings right now. What do you have in your beliefs or your actions, or what are you investing your time in that maybe doesn't resonate anymore, or you're just doing out of habit and you're ready to let that go. Whenever we put our time and energy into something that's not really resonating, or we want to veer to a different path, it drains our energy, it drains our power. So we really want to be looking at, where am I putting my time? Where am I putting my thoughts, my actions, my beliefs into something that is either not serving me anymore, or doesn't resonate? Okay? Because as we grow and as we become more connected with ourselves, those things can change. And sometimes we gotta clear that out, right? Some of the ways that we can know, if we have a hard time just knowing in our mind what maybe resonates or doesn't, sense into how you're feeling with something. So I got these 3 T's that came through. And it is, do you feel tedious? Do you feel triggered? And do you feel temperamental? So tedious, triggered, temperamental. Those 3 things. When those sensations come up or those responses come up, that's a sign for us to maybe pay attention. Something's not jiving, right? It's just not fitting right. So let's take a deeper look at it, okay? And then the last part that came through here, when we sort of clean up our environment, we also want to look at maybe our thoughts. Like, what kind of thoughts do we have going on in our mind that can maybe be cleaned up also? And this is about honesty and accountability as well. And I wrote down here, what thoughts are blowing into your mind? So one of the action steps that we can take as well is to track ourselves for a week and see what thoughts go on in our mind. Our thoughts are energy, right? They're putting out a certain energy, a certain frequency in our experience. And we want to sort of be aware of what's coming into them. And as we start to become more aware of what thoughts are going on in our day-to-day, we might be surprised at what we find, right? Because they can be really sneaky, and that's sort of also affecting our own personal frequency as well, right? So the next one, so we're moving into Earth, okay? And the headline for this one was Out with the Old and In with the New. And what came through for this one? So I got this image of the oyster, the oyster animal spirit came through for this. And, I took some time to think about oyster and what's significant about them. What gifts do they bring? What energy do they bring to help support us in filtering out the old stuff and bringing in new stuff? And oysters can actually, they're ocean cleaners, right? They filter out the water. And I was looking it up, and they can filter up to almost 50 gallons of water in a day. I mean, that's amazing for just, you think this little animal can clean up so much stuff in such a short amount of time. And so it's here to help us filter out our own old energies and maybe imprints that we're still hanging on to, right? And just like with the wind section where we talked about, clearing out what's not serving us anymore, whether it be through our thoughts, our actions, or the people that we're associating with, this is also, there's an aspect of that filtering here as well. And my guides brought in this, this concept of boundaries and saying no, right? Saying no can be really difficult for some people. I know I've had a lot of difficulty with that on my own experience, and that's been something that I've continuously working through in my own life, and really tuning into, if we have trouble saying no, maybe starting to work with that, right? And starting in small ways. If saying no to your parents is really difficult for you, start saying no to maybe a friend that you feel safe doing so with. The shell of the oyster is like this protective barrier, right, to the outside world. It protects the animal's tender parts inside, right? And it's okay to have this exterior, right? If we have trouble saying no, then it's almost like we have this permeable shell in our energy field. And things can get in, attachments can get in, and it can get kind of sticky and loaded down. And in order to be able to effectively filter that out, learning to say no is extremely important. It's an extremely important step in that, right? Because otherwise we're going to just constantly get bombarded with these other energies that we take on in our lives. Okay? So some signs of poor boundaries, if we have difficulty with this, some of the symptoms that can arise within us, we can feel really fatigued. We can have really low energy. We can be really irritable. And I also wrote down here boredom, right? Where we just have this sense of like blah, right? These can be some signs of poor boundaries. Okay? So the next idea with the oyster that came through was that over time, so when it gets a grain of sand within the shell, over time it creates a coating on it, and that's what creates the pearl in the oyster, right? It's actually a grain of sand causing irritation in the oyster, and then it makes this beautiful pearl as a result of it. And so as we begin to filter out our lives and begin to say no, then we can really cultivate and create more joy, more happiness, and more ease and comfort in our own lives as well. So oyster is supporting us with the energy of this time to help us do that, okay? And because this is a spring energy intuitive guidance reading, I want to just touch on the whole energy of spring in general. Spring is about renewal and these plants bursting up from the dormant soil, right? From its dormancy and really springing forward. So the energy of this time is supporting us to sort of spring out of ourselves, right? Our true selves out of here, and owning what we want in our life and asserting that into our own environment, right? And I also want to bring it back to, because this is the earth section, and we talked about this a little bit in the fire section, but it came through again for this one, is that routine, right? If we get into this routine, it also creates stability and safety in our lives. A lot of times difficulty saying no can be, maybe we just didn't feel safe. Our environment growing up wasn't safe or stable. And so having a routine in our life, that's going to help cultivate that a little bit and sort of ease our nervous system. Okay? And practice helps with the flow as well. Okay? So the next section that I have here is the element of water. And the headline for this is Breaking the Surface. So for this one, I was given an image of a well, right? We have like an old time well where you dip the bucket, that kind of well. And, when I think about a well, it goes deep down underground, right? But when we're interacting with the well, if we were to interact with one, we're really, when we dip the bucket in, we're just getting to the surface of the water, getting what we need, and then getting the bucket out of there, right? But for this, I got this sense that we want to dive down into the well, right? So the well for me is sort of this well of emotions, and the emotions are the language of our spirit, and if we just keep things at surface level, then there's so much other elements and information and wisdom that we're not tapping into, okay? And a lot of times this can occur because maybe we don't feel safe to do so. For me in my own experience, feeling emotions was just not something that was really, it wasn't supported in my environment growing up. And so it was really uncomfortable for me for a very long time. And I still work at it. That's still part of my own journey. But we have to break through the surface, right? We have to dive down into the well to tap into that. The particular emotion that came through for this one that sort of went with that surface element was anger. So, I think of anger as this tension, and it can prevent us from really diving in below that. Anger can be this sort of safety blanket for us where we have other emotions underneath of it. Maybe we're angry because we feel really deep grief, or we feel shame, or we feel embarrassment, and we just protect ourselves by creating projecting this anger in our lives, right? And we want to sort of relax ourselves to ease into that and see what's underneath the anger. There's an invitation here to do that. Okay? And the other image that I got of this is of a leaf. I picture a leaf coming down and landing on the surface of the water, and it's floating there, right? And what's keeping the leaf from sinking down below? It's this surface tension of the water. But eventually what happens is that the leaf takes in the water in its cells slowly, and then it gently starts to lower into the water and float down to the bottom, right? And that's sort of the image that I get for us, like what this energy is supporting us to do, right? To slowly start to release the tension and ease ourselves into feeling these deeper emotions, okay? I also get the sense that as we begin to break this tension, right? It's almost like we're opening up a dam, and the flow, things can begin to flow for us. So if we've been feeling really stuck on our healing, or maybe just not really sure why we keep having the same feelings coming up, right? Maybe this anger is like a frequent visitor for you. And this can really help to break that up a little bit and allow the sort of deeper message to come through, okay? And one of the ways that we can do this, this is something that I really like to do to kind of bring body, mind, and heart together. And that is to give ourselves permission to feel the anger and release it, and allow whatever wants to come up and invite it. Sometimes we have to just give our body and our heart this invitation, right? That we're ready and we're willing. Even if on our mind maybe we feel scared about that, just giving the invitation and restating it over and over again, eventually it helps to sort of soften things, and we begin that slow absorption of the water into ourselves, right? Just like the leaf, and we start to slowly sink in, right? It's not a fast plunge. It is a slow absorption, okay? And so I wrote this, I guess you could kind of call it an affirmation of sorts, that you can say for yourself if you like, or you can create something that resonates with you. That's fine, but I'll give you this as a starting point. And so it goes like this. I am ready and willing to release this energy of anger from my life. I open my heart to the truth, and I am safe to feel my emotions. I honor all feelings as they come forward, and I release them with love. Okay? And as we're saying that too, sometimes I like to just tap a certain chakra, like a certain energy center, if I'm feeling tension at a certain spot in my body, solar plexus maybe, throat. The throat's a good one because it kind of opens up our, it's almost like it creates this open invitation of energy. So I really like to do that one. But if we do that as we're saying it, and if we feel different areas, we can, move our hands around wherever it feels right for you. And then the last invitation that I have is, the anger, we don't want to bottle up the anger and pretend it's not a thing, right? We're not invalidating the anger. We're not saying that it's not there for a reason. And it wants to be let out in its own way. So, a couple different ways that you can do this is just like a screaming in a pillow, right? Just set the intention that I'm going to release some anger, scream into a pillow. Maybe not, just in the open room. If you've got neighbors, they might get a little nervous. So I usually try to muffle the sound a bit. Or you could do it while you're driving in your car, right? Nobody's going to hear you when you're driving in your car, and you can do it there as well. And then the other invitation here is, if your anger is directed towards a certain person or a certain event in your life or whatever it may be, you can write a letter. Just get those feelings out, get them out of your system, and put it in a letter as if you're writing a letter to them. You don't have to send it to them, but we want to get it out, right? We want to get all these emotions out. And, you can, after you're done writing the letter, you can do what you like. I usually recommend if you want to burn it or if you want to bury it, or if you want to rip it up, whatever feels right for you. I don't usually recommend keeping it around because that's just kind of like, we want to dispose of it, right? We want to get rid of the charge. We're taking the charge out of our body, we're putting it in here, and it is, this letter is our helper, right? And so we can discharge that in some sort of way that feels right for you, whether it be, fire, burying it in the earth, or whatever. Okay, and on for number 5, the last one. So this one is heart. And the headline for this one is Back to Basics. So my spirit guides gave me this concept of baking a cake, right? So let's say that we want to bake a chocolate cake, and we look in our pantry to see what we have, and we don't have all the ingredients for the chocolate cake. We only have the ingredients for a vanilla cake. So we have 2 choices here, right? We can go out and find the ingredients for the chocolate cake and spend some time doing that, or we can just bake a vanilla cake because it's what we have, it's the resources that we have, and we start with that. And what's the idea behind this that they're giving us? So the way I see it, it is about utilizing what we have, right? Utilizing what we already have and getting really good at efficiently doing that, right? And I feel like they're presenting this as a sort of metaphor for our inner connection, like our inner tools that we have, and specifically about how we connect with, our inner wisdom, our spirit guides, universal intelligence, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to call that connection. And how do we do that? How do we as an individual connect with and receive messages that are coming to us? It's really about basic building blocks, right? If we're making a cake with the ingredients that we have at home, then they're already there. We don't need to search outside, and we want to take inventory of what we have. So we want to sort of take a personal inner inventory of what we have. How are we connecting with messages? And this is about our intuitive capabilities. So if intuition is a little bit new for you, then I encourage you to find out a little bit more about it. Really educate yourself on the different ways that we can receive messages. And, if this is something you're just learning about, I have a free ebook on my website that you can download. And it specifically talks about this, the different, I call them the different clairs, right? There's clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant, all those things. How do we receive messages? So, for me personally on my own path, one of the ones that I had a lot of difficulty really understanding to a deeper level was clairsentient. So I noticed in my early days that I was getting these feelings, these emotions coming through, and I really had a hard time understanding. I had a feeling that they were messages and there was a way for me to interpret them, but I didn't quite understand it. So it really took me some time to fully understand these messages, and I'm still learning. These are all our basic skills with our intuition. They're always evolving, and we're building a deeper connection as we go on our healing path. So just having a really firm understanding of how they're coming through you is going to be really helpful on your path. So basic building blocks. If you don't already have a full understanding of that for yourself, then I encourage you to dive a little bit deeper. And I'll put the link for the ebook down in the description if that's something that interests you. So the word coherence was also coming through. And what do I mean by coherence? Well, this is a sort of a clear connection with our inner world, between our inner world and our outer world, right? We want to be in alignment with that as best as we can. And intuition is going to be the sort of way that we can bridge the communication between the two. And that's why I think it was coming through as something to really look at. Because, if we don't have the basics down, then it can be a little bit more difficult for us to have that coherence, and it can feel a little bit more of a struggle for us. So they talk here too about inflow and outflow. So what is the inflow? That is what I talked about with the intuition. How do you receive intuitive messages, right? And understanding that at a deeper level. And then the outflow, this is about what we're putting out into the world, our energy, because as we cultivate our inner world, it's going to extend into our outer world. And when we make changes on our inner environment and, let go of maybe beliefs or patterns that we were holding on to for a long time that aren't in alignment with our higher self, then our outer world begins to be a reflection of the changes that we're making inside of us. And that's why really doing our healing is so important, right? It's just going to create a more happier, joyous, and aligned life in our world, right? And who doesn't want that? So we have to sort of we have to be willing to see where we're not in alignment, right? We can't see our own face unless we're looking in a mirror. So we want to sort of look at our reflection. We want to reflect on our life. So I want to share a quick story that really, when I was kind of tapping into this, it made me think of this. So back when I was a nurse, the unit that I was working for, this was, I don't know, maybe I want to say it was 10 years ago. It was a while ago. And the unit I worked on, we were really having a lot of struggles with, there was a lot of negativity going on, and it was just a really hard time. I remember we were all feeling really overworked and stressed, and just the whole culture and the environment was just really down. And so management had this idea to have an intervention for us, right? And there was this guy who worked at the hospital. I don't know if he still works there or not, but his whole thing was about positivity, and he, studied the science of the mind and positive thinking and all that stuff. And so they closed down our unit for 2 hours in the morning, and we go and we get there, and he sort of starts the lecture by having us all stand up. And he then says, okay, I'm going to say these statements, and if you don't do this all the time or 100% of the time or something like that, I can't remember the details, but it was something along those lines, then sit down in your seat. And we'll see, the idea is just to see who's sitting down when with each one. So, he starts listing off these things I maintain a positive attitude, and then people sit, and then I never complain about my job, and then people sit, and, I never talk badly about others, and then I never gossip, and, we just see each other starting to sit down. I mean, realistically, looking at it where I am now, we probably all should have sat down on the first one, right? Because it's just, human nature. It's hard to be something 100% of the time, right? Even if you're a really good person. So the interesting thing was everybody had sat down by the time he got to the last one, except one person who stayed standing the whole time. And the interesting thing about this was that the person who stayed standing was probably the one person in the whole unit who was embodied the most negativity and criticism and complaining and all those things. And I just thought it was really interesting. And why I thought of it for this one is because if we're not willing to look at what's going on inside of us and really be honest with ourselves, then it's really hard for us to make changes. So how do we build a deeper awareness, right? How do we get there? Because if we're currently not aware of it, then it can be a little bit difficult to know where to start, right? So judgment is coming through. So when we have judgments about ourselves or others or things going on around us, then that's maybe a little, turnkey. That's our avenue into our inner world, right? So let's say that we have a judgment about somebody that they're selfish, okay? That person's so selfish. Well, let's turn it back on us. I am selfish. Okay, let me think about that. Are there any ways that I exhibit selfish behavior, right? And it can be really difficult to be honest with ourselves, right? Most of us don't want to feel like we're a selfish person, but, the fact of the matter is that we're all human. And so, we can sort of just have some compassion for ourselves. We're all in the same boat. We all have selfish behavior at some points, in our lives. And if we don't admit to it, then it's going to be really hard to, overcome that and see what's the underlying sort of wound being triggered for that, right? It's all about, the best thing that we can do for ourselves is to be honest, even if it's, not the most comfortable, right? We're going to transform our lives by starting to get comfortable with discomfort. That's really how we come into deeper alignment with ourselves, right? The real us. We want to be expressing ourselves in the truest way that we possibly can, and being honest with ourselves, and really having integrity in our reflections, and the work that we do, the healing work that we do, is going to get us there, right? It's going to have our inflow and our outflow be more in alignment. And that's how we generate true power, right? So we're bringing it back to that original message of the power is within you, right? We are responsible for our healing. We might not have had control over a lot of our childhood experiences, for example, but we can certainly, tap into our power right now, and we can change our life. And that starts with being honest with ourselves and doing the work, right? Nobody's going to wave a magic wand and say, ta-da, like you're all set, right? You are now completely healed and enlightened. It just doesn't work like that. This is a journey that we're all going on. This is a life that we're all experiencing, so that we can, be proud of the work that we're doing and express our true selves, right? So I'm going to close it up now. And I just want to say thank you for joining me today for this. I'll be putting out the next one, I think probably in June. That'll be sort of the summer season intuitive guidance. But hopefully this helps to give you, some easier way to navigate the next few months. If you would like some more one-to-one support on your healing path, then I do offer healing services. You can check that out on my website, thespiritwithin.com. I also have some free resources over there that you can download, and I'll link everything down in the description below. And if you liked today's video, I'd appreciate it if you could give me a thumbs up and subscribe to support my channel and help this reach other people. So anyway, I wish you all well on your healing path, and yeah, take care till we see each other again. Bye, guys.